ladies and gentlemen, please give a huge Music Matters welcome to Ralph, Simon, and Bob Ezrin.
Bob Ezrin.
Are we dancing? I can do it. Come on, Ralphie. Here we go. Everybody up. Here we And fade.
There we go. Fade. Very
Thank you
good.
very much. I have more cards from my 2.5 days here than I've ever collected before in my entire life. It's fantastic.
So, Bob, first of all, it's just welcome to Music Matters.
Thank you very
welcome
much.
to Singapore. This is your first time in Singapore.
It is, yes.
And in terms of your whole view of Asia, your creative view of Asia, this is really where you've wanted to come for a long time.
It is. Well, you know, we've been talking about my coming to be a part of this conference since they started in Hong Kong. And for some reason, every year, it's just been impossible to get here. And this last year, when you and Jasper contacted me and said, what does it look like? I thought, I'm just going to make the commitment and put aside the time. And of course, it's the worst time possible for me to be away, but I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, well, and you've been busy with a lot of stuff, and we're going to go through a kind of a travelogue through your career.
Oh, good.
Just showing some of the elements of what you've done creatively.
Okay.
And also the way that you think, because one of the things that you've pointed out, and in fact, you came up with an interesting quote as you were waiting to come on stage, and we'll go through that in a little while. But before we do that, I thought what might be interesting to all of you in the audience, just to give you some essence of how Bob started his career, and then some of the steps creatively that led him to where he is today. And of course, you went to the Royal Conservatory of Music in Toronto, where you learned classical piano.
Yes.
But you had an uncle who had a nightclub in Toronto where you would go, it's called the Penny Farthing, and you'd go and you'd sit in that club and you'd watch artists like Joni Mitchell. She was
Joni Anderson then.
Joni Anderson,
yes.
but she married Chuck Mitchell.
That's correct.
And she became Joni Mitchell. And from an early age, you wanted to become a writer. You even had a duo called The Messengers.
My God, you've done your homework.
Well, no, but the point is that you were really obsessed with music. If
Yes.
there was one thing you want to do, you want to be a writer, you want to be a player.
Yes.
You loved sitting in the nightclub.
Well, I came from a very musical family. I was born into music, and my parents say that I was singing from the time I was 1. I used to, in fact, it's funny, they bought me a little phonograph. That's a record player for, you know. And I would have little records that I would put on, and apparently I knew which song according to the labels. So I would choose my own records at 14, 15 months of age and put my records on and just sing along. My grandfather was a song and dance man. He was a linotype operator by day, and at night he was an amateur amateur musical theater guy. And so he would teach me routines, and I was dancing Me and My Shadow when I was 2, and we sang as a family. My mother was a pianist. My dad played bass to work his way through medical school. So I didn't have any choice. Music made me, not the other way around.
And the time you spent in your uncle's club was
Yes.
also a learning experience for you, because it was in that framework that you also met this very well-known Canadian producer by the name of Jack Richardson.
Well, actually, no. You were good up until there, Ralphie. That was not where I met Jack Richardson. But in that club and on those streets during that period of time, which is 1965, 66, 67, in that period of time, Toronto was actually part of the folk rock triangle. It was Toronto, New York, San Francisco, and some of the greatest bands in the world were forming right there. Next door to us, there was a band called the Minor Bird, and the front men were Rick James and Neil Young in a soul band, right? And then Neil Young went on to be. But and a guy down the street from New York who played guitar and had a harmonica, Bob Dylan, who was just playing at that. This was all starting at that time. And what happened to me then, I was 14 or 15 years old when this was going on. I would go from club to club and watch, and I had each one was what I call a holy shit moment. Because I would sit there and I would look at these people playing and listen to what they were doing, and I'd say, holy shit, that's good, and I suck. And that would make me go home and practice. I would see somebody play something, and I would go home and try to learn what that thing was, because I had all of those amazing holy shit moments. Jack Richardson I met a few years later. I was doing musical theater, as a matter of fact, and somebody introduced me to him. He adopted me, basically, and decided to teach me to be a producer. I was 19.
So when you were 19, and what you learned from Jack was that being in the studio was more than just about playing, musical accomplishment. It was also how you got textural variation on the sounds in what was, by today's standards, people just now today using computers, where you had to learn how to work a desk and how to work the
I had to learn everything.
potentiometers.
Listen, first of all, I started working in studios when I was 8 years old, because my brothers and I were discovered on a tour of the CBC, which is the
Canadian
Broadcasting Corporation National Network. And I had two little brothers who were redheads, twins, very cute. And some producer was walking down the hallway. He said, "Oh, aren't they cute? They don't sing, do they?" And my dad went 5, 6, 7, 8. We were like, "I want a girl just like that girl," in 3-part harmony. And the guy goes, "Okay, you're hired," And the next thing we know, we're working and I loved the studio. I loved being in a TV studio and a recording studio. I loved the smell of it. I loved the ozone layer that was created whenever the lights went on, or the smell of tape whenever I was near a tape machine. So that was already in my blood. But what I didn't know that Jack Richardson taught me was how it all worked and how one put together something like that. I was just talent. I was just a kid who dropped in and dropped out. Jack actually took the time. He hired me, and then I followed him everywhere he went. I sat on every airplane he sat on. And every moment that we were together, I had a little notebook, and Jack would say, "Cardioid microphone." I'd write "cardioid microphone." And he'd say, "That has more of a narrow focus, and this is the kind of sound pressure level it'll take. This is the kind of frequency response you're going to get out of it. Okay, condenser microphone. Yes, sir, condenser microphone." I would write these things down. Then we'd get to the next city, and then he'd start using these things, and he'd say, "Okay, I want a cardioid on that amp." And I would go, "I know what that is.
Huh.
I just heard about that. That's in my notes."
Huh.
And then very shortly thereafter, he sent me off to a boot camp, effectively, at the Eastman School of Music, run by
Rochester,
New York, run by Phil Ramone, a relatively famous guy. And Phil adopted me. He saw something in me, and so he and Dave Green gave me time in that 2.5, 3-week boot camp. They gave me extra time on the console and extra time with microphones and things like that. They let me discover. Then they shipped me back to Toronto to work for Jack again, and from that point on, Jack made me responsible for setting up his sessions, doing pre-production with bands, getting them to the point of walking in the door in the studio, and then he would take over from there.
But your musical background and the fact that you were a classically trained pianist, the fact that you could...
And I played folk music,
And you played folk music as well, meant that you could do the rehearsing with the bands. You could also give them your view about the song structure.
Yeah, I was writing with the bands, but I wasn't sophisticated enough to know that was actually writing. I thought, that's my job. I'm a producer, because I would say, "Hey, how about this line for the chorus?" So I did a lot of writing, uncredited and unacknowledged writing with these bands that Jack was working with, but it was a great experience.
And of course, Phil Ramone in later years became really well known for producing the biggest hits of Billy Joel.
Oh, yes.
And Paul Simon and a number of other people over the years.
Yes.
So let's just go to the slide reel there, please, Ed, and just have a look at some of the acts that you worked with. They're slightly out of sequence, but here's one of the first acts you worked with before you were 24 years old. You worked with, can we just go to the next slide and we'll come back to this one? So
there we go. Well,
here we go.
Alice Cooper, here's the story behind Alice Cooper. They looked a lot weirder than that when in 1969, 1970. They were the wackiest looking group anybody had ever seen. They came into the office, not the group themselves, but the manager with pictures and LPs, and said they wanted Jack Richardson to produce them. And Jack Richardson was a very straight man in his late 30s, wore a suit and tie to work. You know, the last thing he wanted was to be associated with 5 creatures of indeterminate sex, dressed, you know, with you know, black fingernail polish and braided mutton chops. So he just said, he didn't want to do it, but Shep would not take no for an answer.
Shep Gordon, the manager.
Shep Gordon, the manager, and kept saying, "You've got to do it." And he finally said, "Okay, I'll tell you what. I'll send the kid."
You the kid.
I'm the kid. "I'll send the kid, and if the kid likes him, I'll go take a look at the band." Shep says, "Great." And as he walked out of the door, Jack looked at me and said, "Get rid of them." So I said, "Yes, sir." And they sent me to New York to go see Alice Cooper. This is an important story, and we'll take a little extra time on this if it's okay.
Absolutely.
So they sent me to New York to see Alice Cooper. They actually sent me to New York to see a girl who was playing in the musical Hair. They were interested in her. They didn't want Alice Cooper. They wanted me to go see her, see about signing her, and then, oh, by the way, go to Max's Kansas City to see Alice Cooper play and get rid of them. So I went to Hair. I saw this girl. I thought she was okay. But I decided to go on to Max's Kansas City, and the guy who played the lead in Hair, Alan Nichols, was also a CBC baby. So the two of us had something in common. We just, 2 hippie guys, we head off downtown. I said, "How do you get to Max's Kansas City?" They said, "Get off the subway at Houston, follow the laser beams."
Follow the laser beams.
That's all they said. So we come out of the subway, and sure enough, there's laser beams going down the street and turning the corner. We followed the laser beams, and they went right into the front door of Max's Kansas City, this very seedy kind of Victorian building that looked like it was going to collapse on itself at any moment. And we walked in the door, and it was like stepping into a Hieronymus Bosch painting. It was everybody in there had spider eyes and was wearing spandex, and they had black lipstick and black fingernail polish, and they were pasty white-faced, you know. And
That's like goths, the early goth culture.
Yes, I had never heard of a goth. I'd never seen a goth. I didn't know anything about goth. I was a nice hippie from Toronto. So I walked into this den of goths, and then they had a table by the front of the stage where Alan and I sat down, and the lights went down, and suddenly I felt wind in front of my face like this, and I heard boom, boom on the stage right in front of me. But it was pitch black. And then it happened again, boom, boom. And then the next time it happened, there was just a little bit of light. Each time it hit, it was like, and then went black again. And then a little bit more. And then suddenly, staring at me this far away, was the face of Alice Cooper with blood red gums and bright white teeth, and his eyes looking like he was ready. And he had a hammer in his hand, and he went, "Sunrise, she come every morning." And it started singing, and I was like, "Oh my God, I am going to die." And that was just the beginning. And then they went on, and they had pillow fights on stage, and they had sets and props, and it was just the most amazing show. When it was over, I looked at Alan Nichols, and I went, "What was that?" He said, "I don't know, but I think I liked it." And I said, "I think I loved it." So I went running up the stairs, literally running up the stairs to the dressing room. I burst the door open, and I came in with that 19-year-old fervor, you know, and I went, "We'll do it! We'll do it!" I said, "You guys are fucking amazing." I'll put money in the box, don't worry. "You guys are fucking amazing, and we will do it." And they were like, "Great, you know, when do we start?" And I said, "As soon as we can, as soon as we can." And then I walked outside, and I went, "I am so fired." Oh, what have I done? And then I called Alan's partner, Al McMillan, who was kind of my mentor, my consigliere there. And I said, Alan, I did a bad thing. And I told him, he said, you get your ass back to Toronto right now. So I got back to Toronto, I got off the airplane, and I went into the office with that time-honored teenage mantra. As you walk through the door, I went, you don't understand. You don't understand. I said, there were no T-shirts, there were no jeans. This wasn't rock and roll. They were just playing 4 and 4 5. There was like sets and lights and props and things, and they had all of them. And everybody was dressed like them. They knew all the words, and I didn't stop talking. Jack said, enough already. Stop. He said, if you liked it so much, you do it.
How old were you at that time?
I was just about to turn 20.
20 years old?
Yes.
And you went on to make 3 albums with Alice Cooper?
Oh, no, I went on to make, by counting the last one that I just did, I've made about 12 or 14 records with Alice Cooper.
But that really was also a core moment in rock and roll, because they had really brought a whole new kind of theatricality to rock and rock and roll. And you could use all of the expertise you'd been developing in the studio.
Well, all of the expertise I developed over the long time, the 3 or 4 months of sitting at Jack's feet. I mean, right. I didn't know whether to wind my elbow or scratch my watch. I'm going to blow my nose if you want to just mute me for 1 second.
Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, just really interesting in terms of...
Okay, you can turn it back up again. That's part of what I do, by the way. A good producer will say, quick, mute the mic, he's going to cough.
20 years old, you start making your first album with Alice Cooper. And how soon after that did the album actually hit and get into the Billboard
charts? We did things
charts?
very fast in those days. We didn't, the whole album, I think, took about 2 weeks to record and 18 hours to mix.
18 hours
to mix the whole album. And I was exhausted. I thought, man, that's hard work. 18 hours mixing, we mixed like 9 songs in 18 hours. 2 hours a song was amazing. We added reverb. I was very proud. I went, reverb. Oh my God, I'm good. Yeah.
What an amazing beginning. I mean,
yes.
This was really the start of your flight path towards really thinking much more thoroughly about how you'd construct the textures of what you were recording. Let's go to that next, the first slide there, please, Ed, of KISS, and just tell us how you got to meet the guys in KISS.
I was doing a television interview in Toronto. I was going up the stairs at City TV. It's a sort of like a fire escape stairway, and coming down the stairs were these giants in big boots, And I had a listed phone number in Toronto. And this kid, Mike Longman's, a 16-year-old kid, I'll never forget him, used to call me and tell me what was hot. He was the guy, he would call me and say, dude, you really need to look at this band, eh? Because they're like really good, eh? So like he goes, have you heard of KISS, eh? And I go, no, I've never heard of KISS. He goes, oh man, they're like great, eh? They're so wicked. You've got to produce KISS, eh? So I was like, okay, great. And then I'm going up the stairs and coming down the stairs with these monsters. I realize it's KISS. And I say, hi, I'm Bob Ezrin. And they go, oh, we know who you are, because they were emulating Alice on certain levels, and Alice was a bit of a hero for them at that moment. Right. And I said, are you happy with your records? In an innocent way. And they were like, yeah, why? So I said, well, nothing. But if at any point you're not, give me a call. And sure enough, I heard from them shortly thereafter.
And with Gene Simmons as out front as he is today and is kind of known today?
Yes, but you know what? As we grow, it's funny, as you grow, your nose and your ears continue to get bigger while the rest of you shrinks. And in
this case, his tongue.
And in Gene Simmons' case, it's not just his ears and his nose, but the rest of it, his ego, his ears and his nose have grown, and the rest of him has shrunk. And he's unabashed about it. I love Gene. Like he will send himself up faster than anybody that I know. But he is shameless, and he's clumsy, and he's arrogant, and he's just wonderful.
When you were in the studio with him, were they fooling around with theatrical kabuki type makeup?
Oh no, they were already doing it. They started the group as a group of superheroes. That was the whole theme behind it. That was the shtick, yeah.
So they had a cartoon essence of what they should be, but
they knew exactly what they wanted to do.
And did they tell you the kind of music and sound they wanted, or could you be the captain of that?
They were making basic rock records. They were making kind of 1-4-5 rock records, and I went to see them play in Pontiac, Michigan, in front of 9,000 people, 9,000 15-year-old pimple-faced boys. There wasn't a girl in the crowd. It was amazing, you know. So I kind of walked, and when I met with them, and I said, look, you guys, you look amazing, and they actually played pretty well, and they sang great. I said, but we got to get you past that demographic group, you know. We've got to expand your market, because I think girls need to see this and other people need to see it, but it's not going to happen if all you sing about is getting drunk and getting laid. So we need to start developing material that shows a different side. And I told them about a movie. There was a famous movie many, many years ago called The Wild Ones, starring Marlon Brando, where Marlon Brando was a member of a motorcycle gang.
Right.
And the motorcycle gang was that in those days, that was the most dangerous thing in America. Was
juvenile delinquents.
They were total juvenile delinquents. They smoked marijuana.
Wow.
I know it's hard to believe, but yes, they did. So and they stole things and they beat people up. Like, so in those days, that was the most dangerous thing you could be in America, was in a motorcycle gang. He was the leader of a motorcycle gang. He was evil and horrible, but he had a soft and vulnerable side. And of course, the purest and most beautiful girl in the village decided that she would tame him, tame the savage heart, right? And so I said, look, we got to be Johnny and the Wild One. You guys can be cock and balls all you want, and you can be goofy and horrible, but there has to be another side. There has to be a more vulnerable, more romantic side that we're almost ashamed to show, but we'll show it every once in a while. And then every girl in America is going to decide they need to fix you.
Right.
And so we made the record, which got slammed by Kiss fans and critics at the outset, but went on to be the biggest thing that they, and I think
that
it's
was
still
Beth, right?
Well, Beth was the single, the first single, but the album Destroyer is the biggest record they've ever made.
Really amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to the third slide, please, Ed. The one after Alice, and the not next one, please. Yes. Let's go next one after this.
Really? I think
we're trying to do something in sequence. Okay, let's go back to the previous slide.
Let's skip Rod Stewart.
We'll skip Rod.
Yeah.
We'll go through, not in any chronological order, but here's an interesting. You'd worked with 9 Inch Nails and Trent Reznor.
Yes.
And Trent really is today seen as one of the great visionaries of
He is. And in fact, I sent a note to Bob Lefsetz that he actually published, because I was just getting frustrated with people who were trying to satisfy the market. And in fact, it's a mantra of mine, which is that every time, if you are in it to succeed, you're fucked. I know. I'll get it. I'll get it afterwards. But if you're in it just to succeed, you're screwed. If you're in it because you have a burning need to express yourself and a singularity of vision.
Express your aesthetic and your art.
Express your art and a singularity of vision that does not allow you to compromise. You have a chance at making something truly exceptional, something really great. And if you do make something really great, then you have a chance at huge success. Like huge, lasting, generational, transformative success. Mm-hmm. So I can't remember what had come up in Bob's blog, but it was something to the effect that someone was saying, well, you needed to aim at this or do that in order to make it, and that's where I stood up and I said no. And what you need to do is you need not to compromise. You need not to be aware of these forces, or you need to surrender yourself to a bunch of cold-hearted professionals who will sculpt you and mold you into something that's marketable, and you'll be a pat of butter, or you'll be Pokemon, or you'll be something that will go out there and people will buy because you've been packaged and marketed appropriately, but you will not be remembered.
And you won't have a career that will really have
lasting
significance.
No. So, and I used Trent Reznor as an example, because he is one of those guys. Like, he gets a notion in his head and he has a vision for what he wants to do, and nothing moves him off that block.
So how do you, as a producer in the studio, then work with someone like that that's got such a strong will?
It was what do they call it? Permission marketing. But he asked me to do it. He got to a certain point with the record, The Fragile, where he wasn't really, he just couldn't finish it. He had too much stuff. He'd lost the plot. And he loved what I did with Pink Floyd. He's a big Pink Floyd fan. The Wall, I think, was his favorite album of all time. So he asked for me. Jimmy Iovine called me and asked me if I would do it. And because it's not something that I do typically, come in that late in the process. But I'm such a fan of Trent's that I was happy to do it.
And did you find that there was good chemistry between the two of you? He respected your musical input?
Oh, yeah.
You respected
it was
his?
amazing. He's amazing. He's an amazing character, and we're still, and to this day, I think we have a very friendly and respectful relationship. I'm really happy for him, for his success as a composer, and it's only just a natural extension of who and what he is as an artist. He's a real artist. You can call him that. Whereas I think most of the people who are performing, singing, dancing, or playing today, they're performers.
Right.
They're not artists.
Right.
There's a few who are true artists.
Right. And that's what you really try and go for as a producer, to try and find that enigmatic something, that special something that then allows you to help shape what that true artistry is.
Well, you don't get this opportunity every week. So I pray for that. I hope for that. I hope for situations that are that stimulating and where there's real art behind what it is I'm doing. Most of the time, though, you can't have that perfect situation, so something else has to move me. And but listen, I'm lucky in that I can actually afford to say no. I can afford to say no.
Well, one of the people that you had a similar kind of experience with, and we'll pick up a slide of Lou Reed.
Yes.
Now, Lou Reed is an artist, someone that's really had an artistic bent for his entire career. Have you got a picture, Ed, that we can pull up of Lou Reed and one particular album that you did and developed with Lou Reed, which was Berlin?
Yeah.
And tell us the background behind it. Let's
well,
see
that
if we
was
can pick up that slide.
That was a very collaborative situation. And
there's Lou and there's Berlin.
Yeah, well, that's the live Berlin that we
Yeah.
did. We did at St. Anne's, and I actually went on stage with him and conducted the orchestra. But when it was time to do the Berlin album, Lou had just come off of Transformer, and he wanted to do something entirely different. He was afraid of being a pop star. He didn't want to be a pop star. He wanted to go back to being that street New York guy and so on. So we were talking about what he had done in the past. He came to me. We met. He came to my house. We sat on the floor in my living room in a little house in Toronto, and he played me some songs which were okay, but they weren't great. There was something missing. Something that he had in the Velvet Underground, and something that he even had to a certain extent on Transformer. I said to him, you tell a life in 2 minutes and 30 seconds in a way that almost nobody else can. And I said, I love that, but I often find myself wondering afterwards, what happened to those people?
Huh.
I said, for example, you wrote a song called Berlin, which was on an earlier album, where it talks about two people who get together, in Berlin by the wall. You were 5'10" tall. It was very nice, Dubonnet, and so I can't even remember the lyrics anymore. I said, you wrote this song called Berlin, and I often wondered what happened to those two people. Where did they go?
Right.
I said, we should just try and tell a story like that. And then as we were sitting there and riffing back and forth, I went, wait a minute, wait. You wrote it. Let's not tell a story like it. Let's tell that story. And he flipped, because he had never really been given a task like that before. He went, give me a month. I'll be back. And he left. Went back to New York. A month later, he showed up. We sat on the same place on the floor, and he started playing songs like Caroline Says and The Kids. Just so you know, because you probably haven't heard the record, but it's a story of a very dysfunctional couple. She is a speed freak. They have children. She loses the children. Their relationship falls apart, and she commits suicide. That's the story. It was a zany, madcap, uplifting. But it was a street story. That's what Lou did, was street stories. So he wrote these songs. They gave me goose flesh. So he gave me the songs, and I said, okay, now give me a month. And he went away. I sat at the piano in the studio and figured out how these songs should sound. and what we were going to do. I figured out all the parts, got help writing them down because I was very slow, and then we convened in London, England, with a great band made up of superstar players, and we recorded that album.
And the way that you convinced him of that, or at least gave him that catalyst to go and complete the narrative of those songs, that's something that comes naturally to you?
Yeah, I guess so. I think what comes naturally to me is that I see the art in many things. I'll tell you a story. I was in New York City. A flight got canceled, and I got stuck at LaGuardia Airport. So I was sitting in LaGuardia Airport, and there's just a big wall of windows back in those days. And there was a guy who went out there with a pail and a squeegee, who started cleaning the windows. He took this device, dipped it in the water, and with one beautiful motion, soaped down and then squeegeed off an entire window, and then moved on to the next one. And I watched this. It was like a ballet.
Huh.
It was absolutely beautiful.
Huh.
So I went outside and I said to the guy, "You're an artist." And he said, "¿Qué?" So I said, "Oh, never mind. It's nice to meet you." He said, "Nice to meet you."
Ed, let's go to another slide there. We'll have a quick Rod Stewart because of...
Oh, no. Let's move on.
Let's move on from Rod Stewart.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, but the point is that you worked with Rod.
I did.
And we'll move on to
Yes.
that. Let's go... Well, let's...
Do
Bye-bye,
we-
Rod.
I mean, I worked with a lot of people.
You
Do you guys really want to go through them artist by artist, or should we just get on with
No, well,
talking about...
but there's a point to this. So let's
Okay.
go to that slide of the wall, because I'd like to just focus on that,
Okay.
which was such an important junction point for your career.
Yes, it was.
And can we just go play a little bit of that chorus there, please, Ed? Because I want to ask you about one thing on this particular track on the wall, and then we'll go into how it took 8 months in 4 different recording studios to make this album with some really complicated, complex characters. So let's just hear this song and listen carefully to the guitar. Coming up. Okay. Thanks, Ed. So, this has been an extraordinary record for a whole range of different reasons, a long time ago now.
Yes.
But it did take 8 months to make.
Does anybody know this record? Oh, okay. It's hard to tell. I mean, it's generations later, and but the interesting thing is that this is going to be the biggest tour of this year.
Are they touring this year, of course?
Yes.
With the wall itself.
Roger's out touring the wall. Yeah.
But the story is that even when you were in the studio doing this, you got little cardboard characters, and you actually...
Well, yes. Okay. This was a very complicated project.
How did you get chosen to do this?
I had met Roger Waters before in London, and the woman that he was about to marry worked for me in London. So when Roger came to the conclusion that he was not going to be able to handle this by himself, that he needed someone to, the way he put it, he needed someone... Oh, I got to be careful because this all shows up everywhere. So let me put it this way. He needed help.
He needed help.
He put it in a less delicate fashion than that. That suffice it to say. So he needed help just handling the rest of the band. He felt that this was his vision, that it needed to be articulated his way, talking about a singularity of vision. Roger had a, beyond singularity of vision. So... And I don't think they trusted anybody else. She had been with me in the studio. He liked me. So we got together and we decided that we would do it. I only found out when I arrived back in England to start the project that he had also promised Dave Gilmour a co-producer status on the
guitar
project.
player in the
Dave
band.
Gilmour in the band. And that they had somehow intimated to James Guthrie that he would also be in at that point I put my foot down. Dave Gilmour, absolutely. He's in the band. He's a genius. He's fantastic. I didn't know who James Guthrie was, and that was going beyond.
He was more of an engineer than a producer.
He was an engineer. So, but he and a great engineer. Did a fantastic job on the record, by the way. So, but we had a very complex. We had a complex set of problems. We were building an album. It was a double album. We were building a show, and we had an incomplete blueprint for both. We had a general concept, but it was missing elements. And but there was Roger, who was pretty firm at the outset that it all had to be him, that it could not come from the rest of the band, nor could it come from me. He said, and this I can say, he said to me, you can, because I said, look, if you're just looking for a button pusher, I'm the wrong guy. I'm going to talk, and I'm going to tell you what I think, and I'm going to work with you on making this thing work. And he said, you can something to the effect that you can add whatever you want, but you're not, you won't get credit and you won't get paid. So, basically write what you want. As it turns out, there's a song that I brought in called The Trial, which I did get a writing credit on. But I was working on the writing of some of the stuff in an uncredited and uncompensated way. It was okay. I didn't mind. This was a big project. I knew it was a big project. But
Number one for 19 weeks in Billboard.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yes, it was amazing. It continues to be amazing. It's sold. I don't even know what the worldwide total is.
It even served as a very interesting political theme when Nelson Mandela was in prison.
Yes.
That particular song was used to really help the
yes.
movement.
It was used all over the world, actually.
It was.
That particular song, Another Brick in the Wall, and it became the rallying cry for really disparate groups of people. It was a rallying cry for student dissidents, and it was also the rallying cry for the establishment in some places. Anyway, bottom line on this thing, very complicated project, very complicated personalities. There was a great deal to manage. We built this thing we built that wall brick by brick. But once the vision crystallized, then it became a process of carefully crafting what we had intended to do. So it wasn't fumbling around in the dark. This is really important because a lot of you, how many of you here make music, are music makers? I can't really see your hands, but how many are music makers? Oh, less than I thought. Okay, but those of you who make music, do you know what you want to make before you make it? Or do you sit down at your tools and fumble around until you find something? How many know what you want to make before you make it? How many sit down and experiment until you find something? Well, that's interesting. That's sort of half and half. All right, so in a lot of cases, people they'll sit at a piano and they'll noodle and noodle and they'll find something. In this case, it was such a complex thing that we actually knew almost to the note what it was that we had to build. We had a script. I wrote a script, which I have at home for the wall. And it starts off, Act 1, Scene 1, and describes what you're going to hear, talks about, I have it in columns just like a film script. It has sound effects, it has setting, and all that sort of stuff, right? And so we built the wall to that blueprint. It was quite a remarkable experience. And then, of course, there were happy accidents. There were some amazing happy accidents, things that you could never plan for, like the operator on the phone call home. If you listen to the record, there's a phone call home. Mr. Floyd calls Mrs. Floyd. We had somebody on the other end in London, and we said, we're going to call person to person. When the operator asks for Mrs. Floyd, just hang up. So we got an American operator, this wonderful black woman, just a wonderful, wonderful woman. She said, how can I help you? We said, it's Mr. Floyd calling for Mrs. Floyd. So she said, she rings the number in London. Man answers, goes, hello. And she says, it's Mr. Floyd calling for Mrs. Floyd. Would she be in? And the guy hangs up, right? And she goes, he hung up.
Oh, that's right. It's in the record.
It's in the record. She goes, he hung up.
Yeah.
So she calls back. Now she's getting a little upset. It's Mr. Floyd calling collect from Mrs. Floyd, you know, and the guy hangs up. She says, he hung up again. Is there supposed to be a man there, right? She's getting upset for us. It was so wonderful. I don't know who she was, and we could never find her, but if I could find her, I would just hug her and kiss her to death. It was beautiful. It was just a beautiful, natural
And the
moment.
success of that record really lofted you into a completely new trajectory as a producer, where...
Well, you'd be surprised. That's what people think, and that's what I thought. So at the end of that record, I decided to go back to Toronto because I said, this is so big that my career is made. So I moved back to Toronto because I wanted to be there with my wife and kids. And literally within 18 months, it was Bob who? I swear. And it took me about 4 years or 4.5 years until there was, not only was there not great work, there was almost no work. And Randy Phillips, God bless him, who now runs AEG, and was a manager of a band called The Kings that I produced from Toronto, it said to me, why are you here? And I said, well, I love this town, and I want to be here. He said, you're going to die here. He said, you've got to come to L.A. So
And that prompted you to move to Los Angeles?
Yes, and we moved to L.A., and 6 weeks later I was in the studio with Rod Stewart.
So that's where the Rod Stewart slide comes in. Okay, so Ed, let's just quickly go through some of the slides because we want to keep this moving quite quickly. We got Rod. Let's go beyond Rod. Goodbye, Rod. We've got Lou. Here we are. This is someone that you worked with a couple of years ago, but also you produced. Let's play a little bit of that track, can we? How many of you recognize this song in the audience? I'm sure many of you do. You produced it. Beautiful, beautiful record.
Climbing up on Salisbury Hill, I could see the city light.
Thanks, Ed.
It was blowing
So Peter Gabriel, just some musings on how you find working with Peter, such an extraordinary creative, and the two of you seem to be made for each other.
Yeah, we were, because I was kind of a bull in a china shop, and Peter was just fresh out of Genesis, trying to find his way, and a very humble guy, a kind of shy, humble spirit. In fact, he mumbled. Peter, at that point, it's hard to imagine this guy who is the superstar that we know now. But he was shy in public. He would stammer. He didn't speak very well publicly. It was hard to get out of him exactly what he wanted. So, and I was like, Beauregard, just pushing everything through. So they asked me to do the album. We moved Peter to New York. I had my apartment in New York. And I got him and his wife a flat to live in. And every day he had to come to my apartment and sit at my piano and write. And I would stay up in my office and work on other things. Every time I heard something that I liked, I would run down the stairs and go, record that. He had a little cassette machine, and he would record it. We did that for, I think it was like 2 weeks solid, just writing bits and pieces, putting them on the... Then I sent him back to England to flesh those things out. And then I met him in England. We went through them together, and then we reconvened in Toronto, where we had put together an amazing band, including Tony Levin, who stayed with him for his, has stayed with him for his whole career, and Steve Hunter and Alan Schwartzberg and Jimmy Malin, God rest him, and Larry Fast. I mean, just amazing people, and Robert Fripp, the great Robert Fripp. So we put together this band of misfits. It was like the Dirty Dozen. Each one of them were picked because they did something uniquely well, and the decision I made was because Peter was so shy and because it was so important to get him out of himself that I created a live environment for them. We played this record pretty well live. We worked out we would go into Jack Richardson's office, which was down the hall. We'd sit at the piano. Peter would play the piano, and these are complex songs, and these guys would be writing feverishly, trying to stay up with him. Tony Levin would be reading a novel, paying no attention. And, of course, he'd get it right on the first take, because he's just a musical genius, right? So, and then we'd run back in the other room, and we'd start working out and setting up parts. And in certain songs, like Salisbury Hill, I took away Alan Schwartzberg's drumsticks, and I took away his cymbals. I put a towel over his snare drum. I gave him a shaker and his foot. I said, that's all you get. So it's... And with Larry Fast, I said, Larry, let's make like a synthetic drum thing. We didn't have drum machines that sounded good in those days. So he made this thing he made the sounds that went boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 because it's in 7, right? The song's in 7. So Larry played that pattern. Alan Schwartzberg had a shaker and this, and each guy was given a different instrument than what they were used to playing, and then we started to play the song. Steve Hunter came up with that riff. It was brilliant from the minute I heard it, and it was inspiring to all of us. It was inspiring to Peter. We had one problem. The chorus of the song was, son, he said, make your life a taxi, not a tomb. I said, wrong. He said, what? And I said, there's no way that's going on this record. Now, make your life a taxi, not a tomb is not going to happen. So we recorded the song, and then we experimented with choruses for the whole album, right up until literally 2 days before we mixed the song. We were playing around. Has anyone, one of them was, does anyone know Officer Muldoon? That was one of them. Does anyone know Officer Muldoon? One of them was, Zdragab na Drokera Tagvoy Luf. Zdragab na Drokera Tagvoy Luf. Which, if you turn it over, says, fool, you've got the record on backwards. So we had to rhyme with ooh, right? It was crazy. And finally, I don't know how we came up with it. We came up with grab your things, I've come to take you home, which became a kind of mantra for him and for his fans for a long time thereafter. And that song was a hit for him. It launched his solo career. It established him as an artist of real validity, an authentic artist, right? And I love that record. One of the things that I regret the most is that we ended up having to work on the safety masters of the record because in those days, going through metal detectors actually
degraded the tape,
put a swishing sound on the tape. Accidentally, masters went through the metal detector. So we ended up having to work off of safety masters. And I didn't know then what I know now technologically. And I just wish I could get my hands on those tapes again and just remix the thing because it's a little bit soft sounding, and it was in the studio, it was a harder sounding record than that. I'd love to get that back. I know how to do that today. I could do that now.
We're going to go to a video that we've got of an act that you've been working with recently, just to show what happens in a studio. Just a little clip. Okay. You've recently been working with an act called Two Cellos.
Yes.
So, Ed, if we can show the video of Two Cellos, I'm sure that you and Dickie know where
to Orlando, Florida, to see them play with Elton John. And they were the opening act in front of 16,000 people. After the first song, they had a standing ovation. You never see this. My goal for them is the same as my goal for any artist, which is to help them to realize their dreams, but making sure also that what they dream of will please the audience, because that's why we get to do what we do.
Which is why you do what you do.
Right.
And that act, Two Cellos, and let's go back to the slides to show a couple of the recent acts you've been working with. You worked with Taylor Swift now that you're living in Nashville.
Yes.
Let's have a look. Oh, Jay-Z. You produced something with Jay-Z.
I did his movie, Fade to Black, yes.
Which was what?
Fade to Black.
No. But what did you do with?
He had just done the Black Album, and they were doing a concert at Madison Square Gardens. And during the making of the Black Album, they shot a ton of footage. And then they shot the concert, and then they didn't know what to do with it. They had all of this. They had a ton of footage. So they came into Radical Media, where I was working out of Radical Media. We had moved to New York, and Johnny Kamen, who runs Radical Media, is a dear friend of mine. And Johnny asked me into the meeting and said, what do you think? What can we do with all this stuff? They played it for me. They played me. They made a kind of presentation on video, and they called it A Perfect Night. And they went and put all this stuff together. And I listened and I watched, and I said, you know what? This isn't a perfect night. This is it's his farewell concert. At that time, he was saying about. I said, "This is Fade to Black," and everybody went, "Whoa," And so and I said, "Okay, So that's the story we tell. It's Fade to Black, and so then Justin Wilkes, whose brother Adam is here. Adam is with AEG in China. Justin and I co-produced the movie and pulled all of that stuff together and created an actual documentary.
We've got to move a little forward here on this. And one of the things that happened that had a big emotional impact on you was when the Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans.
Yes.
And what you did then was it affected you so much emotionally because you took it upon yourself to try and resurrect for the music and the musicians and the culture of New Orleans something. We've got a special surprise because we've got a clip from someone that you love and someone who loves you and that you like to work with.
Yes.
Ed, we've got that
What
clip
have you done, Ralphie?
Well, this is a surprise for you,
Okay.
and I think maybe a surprise for the audience as well.
Oh, okay.
Let's just have a look at this clip from Mr. You Know Who.
Okay. It's not Rod Stewart, is it?
It's not Rod Stewart.
Okay. So far, he looks a lot like me.
He looks not like you.
So, yes, I know him very well.
Okay, so this is, you got that there, Ed? We got it coming up? We're coming up in a minute, but the Katrina was a big issue that really affected you emotionally very much.
It was a huge issue because, well, first of all, it was stunning to me that a major city in the United States of America literally washed away, and that as a country, we were unable to do anything significant about it for the longest while. The people were trapped and their lives were threatened. That was the first thing that struck me, was just that how impotent as a nation we were and how leaderless we were at the time. But then the second thing that came to mind was, holy shit, underneath all of that water is all the music that comes from the most important music city in America. It's the crucible, it's the place where modern American music was really born, where the synthesis of West African music and European music occurred, to create that uniquely American art form, jazz. And also, where some of the blues, although blues was more towards Mississippi, but even the coast of Mississippi was wiped out. So I panicked, and a lot of people panicked. We thought, wow, it could be over. It could be gone. And that would be terrible. You keep looking over. Are you guys...
We're okay? Okay, we're okay. Oh, the clip is okay. Okay, let's go for the clip, Ed.
I've known Bob Ezrin for many years now. We met through music, but not in the way that you might expect a musician and a music producer to connect. We met soon after the Katrina disaster, and together over a lunch resolved to try and find a way to do something for the musicians and the music culture of the New Orleans area, the Gulf Coast. And within a very short space of time, really as a result of Bob's genius for organizing, we managed to gather together a coalition of industry people and organizations under the umbrella of Music Rising, a charity that managed over a period of time to put instruments in the hands of literally thousands of musicians from the Gulf Coast region. And with the help of my band U2 and Green Day and our amazing fans, we were able to raise enough money to not only cater to the professional musicians, but also to equip a lot of churches and schools that had lost all their music equipment in the flood. And what I learned about Bob Ezrin through that experience is that he has this incredible keen mind, this incredible ability to make complicated things look simple. The way he sorts out and arranges for things to be done is incredible to see. And when you look back at Bob's career as a producer, you get to see why he has, in so many instances, managed to work with artists to produce their most important albums. His organizational, strategic thinking comes into play, but also his incredible music talent. He's classically trained, a great piano player himself. So his understanding of the technical aspects of music is very broad. He really is part of a very select group of producers, of which really there are no more. You know, he and George Martin, Jimmy Miller, Brian Eno, Johnny Lanois, they are in many ways the golden age of producers that is part of the golden age of rock and roll. And it's no coincidence that some of the greatest albums of all time were made during that period, during the period when Bob was working with the likes of Alice Cooper, Pink Floyd, Rod Stewart, just to name a few. So I just want to say that it is very fitting that Bob should be given this place of honor in tonight's proceedings. He is a man worthy of that kind of recognition, and I just want to say on a personal note, well done, Bob. I hope you enjoyed tonight. It's been a privilege to get the opportunity to share some of my feelings about you and your great talents and great work and contribution to music and all other things. So have a great night. Thanks everyone. Bye.
Is that something? That is something.
Whoa.
The
Now-
Edge talking about you, brother.
Here's the irony of this. He must have made that. I had lunch with him like
4 days ago.
Sunday.
Yeah.
And so he must have made, because he didn't say a word.
Well, he wasn't allowed to.
You're a sneaky little guy, Ralphie. That's really beautiful. Thank you.
Well, that
Can
comes
I get a
from the
copy
heart.
of that?
Absolutely, you can.
Wow,
and
that's
of course,
gorgeous.
unfortunately, we've got to wrap. We had so much more we wanted to talk about. But you're going to China this weekend.
Yes, I am.
You really want to work in China.
Yes, I
You've
do.
had some linkage with
Well,
Lang
you know
Lang
what?
and a band from Mongolia.
Before we get away, can I just talk about some artists here?
Yes, please do. That's
May
very
I,
important.
May I?
Yes.
You know, I got handed a bunch of music while I was here, and I went upstairs and listened to all of it.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, first of all, I wanted to thank everybody who gave me stuff, and I wanted to do a shout out to a couple of them, right? Some of it's going to be really positive, and some of it's not going to be quite as positive. There was now I'm forgetting because you've just blindsided me with that thing, and I'm overwhelmed. But there was one group, Monster Cat. Is that correct? Monster Cat? Yes? Okay. Guess what? First of all, it took me about 10 minutes to figure out how to open the package and get to the CD. Second of all, I couldn't find your name anywhere. Third of all, there was no contact information for anybody on the Monster Cat CD. And yet I put it in, and I thought, oh, this is kind of cool. And I would have sent you an email. So just know, please don't make your audience work. Don't make them work. Make it easy for people to discover you. It's, you've been hearing it for days and days, but that's just a microcosmic example of a really boneheaded mistake. If you're going to give a guy like me something, just give it to me easy and make it easy for me to find you. It's got to be somewhere. And by the way, just know that if you're handing out CDs, if that's the way it's going to go, then the only thing that's going to survive the exchange is the CD itself. Right? The packaging is going to go in the garbage. I'm going to forget your card. I'm going to be traveling on. One day I'm going to get on an airplane, put a CD in my computer, and I'm going to listen and go, wow, that's great. And I'm going to take the CD out and look at the label. And if you're not there, I'm going to forget about it.
Very good point.
Okay? So that was one. I heard some interesting singer-songwriter stuff from, now, there were two people, and now I got to find my notes because I'm going to mess this up, I know. And I had a piece of paper here somewhere, Ralphie. What did I do with it? No, it's probably, here it is. I got it. Because I just don't want to mess up anybody's name. But there were two singer-songwriters that I really thought showed a lot of promise that you guys should all check out. One was Nicholas Chim, right? And the other one was Charlie Lim. And I was really particularly interested in the fact that this stuff was like, this sounded to me like Act 3 of Grey's Anatomy. It's like that song that they cut to when they have that big emotional scene, you know. Both of these guys were writing stuff like that. What I would like to say to both of you is that the writing is good. It's good. It's not quite yet great. That the lyrics are your weakest point. And that I think that and in general, and the stuff that I was listening to from here has kind of a weakness, a weak spot in the lyrics, and that's something that you guys need to address. And maybe it means collaborating with somebody else. I think one of the difficulties of living in a multilingual society is that no one language expresses exactly how you feel. So I think that if you're going to write in one of the many languages you speak, you may want to reach out to somebody who only speaks that language to help you then to finish the expression. And then there's the band Six, where I thought, is it Kevin? Is that right? And but anyway, the two leads in Six I think are just fantastic.
You're interested in working with acts from Asia?
Yeah. Well, and I'm a big fan of, and I'm actually going to meet with some. I've been a big fan of Chinese music for a long time. I'm a big fan of Sa Ding Ding, and I'm thrilled to death that I'm going in the studio with Sa in
Beijing.
In Beijing in a couple of days.
Incredible.
Yeah, I'm really happy about that. And I'm going to meet a couple of the guys from Hungai. I've been a big fan of Hungai for a long time.
That's a band from Mongolia?
Yeah, they're Mongolian. If you don't know them, they're remarkable. And I'm going to meet a new artist. This girl has actually played in Canada, so I know a little bit about her. But she's a sort of alternative pop, very interesting artist called Wanting. Wanting, that's her name, Wanting. But it's Wanting, and I think it's Wanting Chu. I think is her family name. But Wanting is the name she goes under, and she signed a network in Canada. She's a really interesting act too. So I'm going to meet all these people. I'm really excited about meeting people that have only just been sort of imaginary to me.
Well, Bob, unfortunately, we could go on for another hour here with all of these anecdotes. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to close this evening as we walk off the stage with a video clip of something that Bob did with an array of artists after the terrible earthquake in Haiti. You obviously do a lot of things that have a social conscience.
Give me a disaster.
Give me a disaster anytime, in the studio or out. But ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and give a great thanks to one of the great record producers of our time, Bob Ezrin.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
It started out as my song, but then it became their song, all of these artists' song, and now it's really going to be Haiti's song.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks. I'm not sure we have time to go through that. It's an amazing story. It's an amazing video. We'll send you the link to it. We actually tried to get Keynote to come here last year, and unfortunately he ended up in the studio. But one more time, please go crazy for Bob Ezrin. What a lovely man. What a lovely man.